anything built atop of the EVM stack is going to be susceptible. We're going to see $1 billion hack, and that prediction came true. I think it's only going to get worse with time. The stacks that exist today in Web3 are inherently unsafe. If you can coordinate what people do online in a very programmatic way and in a composable way, you'll solve the world's problems. Whether they're buying or selling assets, whether they want to build rules around their data and decide who can see that data, who can't see that data, if they want to give you access to a file, revoke access to a file. Right now, these systems on the internet do not talk to each other to make that possible. So our narrative is very, very different. We're really rebuilding the Google stack, right? The AWS stack. We have a decentralized KMS. We have a decentralized storage layer. We have a decentralized coordination layer. All these things are now available with Sui, and it's now getting adopted. For example, you can have a whole front end of your website loads from Walrus, and you get guarantees that it's not been hacked. You get guarantees around the packages you're engaging with online versus the internet today that gives you no guarantees that you're engaging with the right program, should I say.
Welcome to Epicenter, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and people driving decentralization and the blockchain revolution. I'm Brian Crane, and today I'm speaking with Adeniyi, who is the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Mysten Labs, the company that's built a Sui network. Of course, Sui doesn't need much of an introduction. It's been one of the L1s. So the next generation L1s has been getting the most traction and the most activity. So super excited to talk with him about the history, the technology, and some of the things going on in Sui. So just before we get started with Adeniyi, we want to share a few words from our sponsors this week.
If you're looking to stake your crypto with confidence, look no further than Chorus One. More than 150,000 delegators, including institutions like BitGo, Pantera Capital, and Ledger, trust Chorus One with their assets. They support over 50 blockchains and are leaders in governance on networks like Cosmos, ensuring your stake is responsibly managed. Thanks to their advanced MEV research, you can also enjoy the highest staking rewards. You can stake directly from your preferred wallet, set up a white label node, restake your assets on EigenLayer or Symbiotic, or use their SDK for multi-chain staking in your app. Learn more at chorus.one and start staking today.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Gnosis, a collective dedicated to advancing a decentralized future. Gnosis leads innovation with Circles, Gnosis Pay, and Metri, reshaping open banking and money. With Hashi and Gnosis VPN, they're building a more resilient, privacy-focused internet. If you're looking for an L1 to launch your project, Gnosis Chain offers the same development environment as Ethereum with lower transaction fees. It's supported by over 200,000 validators, making Gnosis Chain a reliable and credibly neutral foundation for your applications. Gnosis DAO drives Gnosis governance, where every voice matters. Join the Gnosis community in the Gnosis DAO forum today. Deploy on the EVM-compatible Gnosis chain or secure the network with just one GNO and affordable hardware. Start your decentralization journey today at gnosis.io.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming on. It's great to have you.
It's an honor. Look forward to always talking to you.
I thought it would be interesting to start a little bit with the origin story, maybe both in terms of like your interest in crypto, and then, I think my understanding is a lot of this early initial work happened still at Meta, at Facebook.
Yeah. So by way of background, I've been in crypto since late 2011, actually. So I've been in crypto for a long time, got involved in the Bitcoin space very early. I was mining Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin at 10 cents.
Oh, wow.
Really interesting. I wish I didn't sell a majority of my coins, but it is what it is. But I built a number of companies in the space. I got involved in Facebook, actually, on Libra. I was working at VMware, and Facebook had taken one of the top distributed systems researchers that we had. And I got interested in their project as a result of that and realized they were building something really compelling. That's where I met my co-founders, interestingly, Sam, George, Costas, Evan. We had a really good time working on a project. I still say today, it's probably the second best job I've ever had, working at Meta on Libra. And of course, the best job I have right now is working on Sui. So we had a number of regulatory hurdles in getting Libra to market, which it never got to see the light of day, but still the spirit of the project lives on through Sui. When we left Meta, we actually didn't use although the code is all open source, we didn't use the code that we had at Facebook for Sui. We learned a lot from building Libra of what not to do. We're building to a very specific timeline, very specific set of primitives, and it was really going to be a more permission system at the beginning when you're launching Libra. It was going to be between 25 to 30 members that started the consortium, and over time the plan was to decentralize and build something more scalable over time. When we left Meta, we had the opportunity to just start from a blank slate. We also knew that the way you succeed here is not trying to build just a layer one. We believe there's a pristine opportunity to build a layer for the internet, a decentralized stack where developers who wanted to build new business models can thrive. And the internet today lacks that. If you want to build anything in the internet today, you're really using existing centralized stacks who have very difficult primitives that don't really all gel together really well, and there's no programmability or composability across these assets. So we felt that there was a big opportunity to build a multi-trillion-dollar business in trying to basically decentralize the entire stack and compete with the likes of Google, Facebook, or wherever, in terms of providing that level of infrastructure and services for people to engage with. That formed Mysten Labs, and Mysten Labs' first product was Sui. And Mysten Labs' second product was launching Deepbook, and third was Sui NS, and now Walrus as well. We have a number of protocols coming out very soon that extend that. You're going to have general purpose computation that you can do, verifiable off-chain computation that you can do with Nautilus that we'll be launching very soon. And you have Seal, an identity-based encryption scheme that lets you manage keys using threshold signatures as a way to not have to manage keys yourself to encrypt and decrypt files, which is what you're going to need for the internet. But all this stuff is very composable. It's all programmable. You can build whatever you want with this new decentralized stack. And we're the only company in the world that's doing this.
So when you think of the long-term vision of Sui, so you describe it as kind of this decentralized internet stack. So sounds like quite a divergence from the way people have thought of L1s historically, or like how do you feel like the vision kind of it diverges here?
Yeah, people building L1, they're just really thinking mostly about trading to a large extent. They'll try and tell you it's more than that, but realistically, they only care about tokens being launched. Our vision's always been, hey, if you can coordinate what people do online in a very programmatic way and in a composable way, you'll solve the world's problems. And a layer one is what you're meant to use for that, right? It's meant to, well, Sui does that, right? Most other ones don't. The goal of Sui itself, that layer, is to help coordinate what people do online, whether they're buying or selling assets, whether they're owning concert tickets or transferring it, whether they want to build rules around their data and decide who can see that data, who can't see that data. If they want to give you access to a file, revoke access to a file. Right now, these systems on the internet do not talk to each other to make that possible. You have to build things using duct tape all over to make it work, and you end up realizing that you just build a centralized system because it's easy to coordinate when you own everything in-house. This is why we have these mass conglomerates, right? We just do everything in-house themselves, and you have no real composability across services. That is the opportunity, and it's a deviation from what L1s do, because I believe that ambition is not something I've seen voiced by any L1, right? Our ambition is beyond that. We believe that we can coordinate what people do online using Sui, and you can marry that with the ability to have people own their own data using Walrus. You can coordinate that with like allowing people to encrypt and encrypt or give access to a file, remove access to a file using Seal. And then you can also verify what they've done online, whether you want to verify bank balance in the bank account, you want to verify the weather, you want to verify some computation that happens off chain, but then attest to that using a blockchain. Sui lets you do that as well with Nautilus that's coming out. So our narrative is very, very different. We're really rebuilding the Google stack, right? The AWS stack. You imagine AWS as storage, it has compute, it has encryption, KMS services. We have a decentralized KMS. We have a decentralized storage layer. We have a decentralized coordination layer. All these things are now available with Sui, and it's now getting adopted as we speak.
So like let's say if you take like Solana, right? They have always had this this description of the vision as like, oh, decentralized NASDAQ, and like as you pointed out, right? It's very focused on trading and financial use cases. Do you also feel there's a particular type of application or that this is most crucial for, right? Because in the end, a lot of stuff, people just use normal centralized products, and they seems to work fairly well. But what is kind of the key breakthrough here, or the type of problem where this is really crucial?
Yeah, so the three areas of focus we have, it's we have a focus in commerce, in finance, and then also in gaming. Those are the three areas of focus. But Sui and our platform and family of products are very general purpose. You can build anything you want on them. And in fact, I'd argue you can build a lot more verticals across horizontal using our stack than anywhere else. For example, you can have a whole front end of your website launched from Walrus, and you get guarantees that it's not been hacked. You get guarantees around the packages you're engaging with online, versus the internet today that gives you no guarantees that you're engaging with the right institution, you're engaging with the right program, should I say. It's something called binary transparency that matters. Um, Solana started off with this premise of, hey, we are building a decentralized NASDAQ because their mantra is like, hey, if we solve trading, we solve a massive problem. We believe you have to go beyond that, right? Sui already has a decentralized NASDAQ, right, which is called Deepbook, and that's growing significantly fast. It operates faster in terms of throughput than any other center limit order book that exists in Web3. It performs as well as most centralized exchanges to a large degree. If you're going to do bulk trades, you could do that on Deepbook today. But our remit is larger than that, right? It's going beyond just trading. It's things that you do on the internet. Everyone does commerce, everyone does finance, and everyone does some form of gaming. There are over 3.1 billion gamers. Last year, we spent over $200 million. That's more than movies, that's more than music combined. So we're going after massive areas where users can engage with the chain in very interesting ways that don't have to be front and center. I always say, when you go to a website today, you don't think this website is awesome because it's run on Google. It's just a website, right? And our infrastructure is going to be that well hidden in the back end. It's going to power the most of the internet. You can start running banking applications on Sui, and you can get guarantees that the banking application you're engaging with is absolutely legitimate and the application is up to date. It's not been hijacked. We saw a massive hack that happened, over $1 billion lost of recent. If this stack was built using Walrus as a front-end store layer and then Sui as a back-end coordination layer, that hack would have been absolutely impossible. And we made the point that anything built atop of the EVM stack is going to be susceptible. We're going to see a $1 billion hack, and that prediction came true. I think it's only going to get worse with time. The stacks that exist today in Web3 are inherently unsafe. They're very, very difficult to build predictable business models because, one, costs are very, very high because your business gets successful, gas fees go through the roof. They're built on the concept of block space being this finite resource. And when you have a finite resource, supply and demand kicks in. The more block space demand you have, the higher the price is to go to deal with the supply and demand. Sui does not work under that premise. In fact, the more resources you need, the more block space you need for Sui, the more hardware you throw, therefore you scale it horizontally. So Sui is the only chain that's been demonstrated that you add 7 times the hardware, you get 7 times the throughput, 0 increase in latency. So in mainnet right now, our configuration would run at 297,000 transactions per second. You add 7 times the hardware, you get 7 times the throughput with no increase in latency. This is how the internet should work, right? Like, it's horizontally scalable. This is how we build infrastructure for search at Google. It's how we build infrastructure for Facebook in terms of anything we did. Everything needs to have an element of provide more resources and then you scale horizontally. That level of expertise has not existed in Web3. It's the first time it's been possible. I think we're bringing that level of expertise of research and development to Web3, and that's going to be what's needed to build the next generation infrastructure that everyone is going to be powering their businesses off.
Let's dive a bit into the technical architecture. Like, how would you describe the technical architecture of Sui?
So it's exactly what I was saying, right? Like, the first thing is, what makes Sui amazing is not the fact that there's one thing we do well. The optimizations required, which is why I'm against this like modular approach. It doesn't make much sense, right? The monolith works because you understand every intrinsic layer, right, of the infrastructure. I mean, you can take the max opportunity to optimize the heck out of it, right? We have a storage model that is object-based. So intrinsically, we're using an object-based system. We know whether one transaction and another transaction have contention. And this is done statically. There's no need to programmatically figure that out, which means the more CPUs you have, the more things you can do concurrently in parallel. No blockchain does that. Everything is assumed it's a single large database, and then you lock the entire database every time you want to make updates. So dealing with contention is inherently difficult on other chains, where Sui, the data model, it's baked in. So we've got a data model that is object-based. We have a programming paradigm with Sui Move that takes advantage of that object-based system and allows you to build and craft real-world assets, real-world systems using an object paradigm. Most programming languages are object-oriented. Most developers understand object-oriented concepts. So building on Sui, they're learning it in less than 4 days. People are getting very competent in building in Sui Move in 4 days because the paradigms they're used to in traditional programming languages are afforded to them in Sui. Separately, we have a very low latency consensus scheme that scales horizontally. So Mr. SETI, which we launched in Basecamp last year, took latency, end-to-end latency, down to 400 milliseconds. Actual finality from when I submit a trade to when it's final, we drop the latency down to 400 milliseconds. This is insane. So you really have our block times are less than 100 milliseconds, something like 70 to 80 milliseconds. Those numbers are interesting, but what really matters is what's the user experience. So when people use a DeFi protocol on Sui, they realize all transactions are instant. When you do a trade, when you do a swap, when you want to make a payment for something, everything happens lightning fast. It feels just like Web2, to the point where you think it's some centralized server running. That is the experience people want. The idea of waiting and having this optimistic finality is not how you build real compelling applications. So that stack allows developers to really build applications that are akin to the experiences of Web2. And then you add on to the fact that we have something called ZKLogin, which is this cryptographic primitives in Sui that lets you use your existing Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, whatever account you have as an identifier to create an account on chain and do that fully permissionlessly. So if you're logging with your Google account, you have a wallet in Sui. Google have no idea what transactions you're doing. They have no idea between your Google account and on-chain address. Nobody can tell the difference. That is a superpower, which means you can onboard users into Sui using normal Web2 primitives and then need to be none the wiser whether they're engaging with the chain or not. What makes this super important, though, is it's the chain itself that verifies your session. It's not some third-party middleware that takes all your data and listens to all your transactions that you do and tries to sell ads to you. The chain itself verifies that session, which is super critical. That is a game changer in terms of the primitives that we've launched.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff I want to dive in here. Maybe we can start with the last one. So this login, so it's kind of like a sign in with Google. And how does that work under the hood?
So it's called ZKLogin. It's something that we built in-house at Mysten. It's actually something we're trying to solve as a problem at Facebook, but we never had the time nor the resources at the time to figure it out. It still was cumbersome. We still needed to hold cryptographic signatures. With what we have with ZKLogin, what happens is we will generate a zero-knowledge proof using your your cookie that you get from when you sign in with Google. And that generation of a mathematical proof is what we use to authenticate. It creates what we'll call, it's basically a temporary key that you use to sign transactions. So these things expire after some number of days. You have to sign in again, right? Which is what you expect, right? With any account. But once you sign in with ZKLogin, you can use that once you've signed in with your Google account, Facebook supports Kakao and a number of other providers, and it keeps increasing on a regular basis. You then have that deterministic way to sign transactions in the Sui ecosystem. That means from a user perspective, private keys are no longer a thing. If you lose access, if you forget your password for your Google account, you just reset your Google account password and you still have access to your assets as well. So it's done entirely in a fully transparent way from a user perspective. It's a way you onboard users, asking people to go and download a wallet and then go and remember some paraphrase or some PIN. It's just not going to work, right? I mean, if you're paranoid about $1 billion, yes, maybe you're going to do something elaborate with a ledger device or whatever. But for a couple of $100, maybe $20, $5, even like $15,000, right? Most people are using ZKLogin. It's actually, I feel safer with ZKLogin than using some key management system because I've lost money using key management systems before. But my Google account is defended like Fort Knox, right? Or my Facebook account is developed is as secure as I want it to be, right? So I'll use those schemes because I'm comfortable with them. I sign in to a number of services online today using those schemes, and I feel more comfortable accessing assets that way. So that's really what we've built here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a tremendous UX breakthrough for sure. And I do agree. I think having that on the base layer is very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we have something called crypto agility, right? We support keys with Solana, key with ETH. You can use whatever key you want to sign transaction with Sui, right? But the fact that you can now use your Web2 keys to sign transactions with Sui, that's another element of that. That's very
Do you
important.
see that also as a sort of account abstraction thing, where then you could potentially use that to, execute actions on other chains?
Yeah, we actually have a project on Sui called Eka, and Eka fundamentally does that, right? It effectively lets you sign transactions on any chain you want. It supports Solana, Sui, ETH, you name it, right? You can effectively use Sui as a layer for coordination. It does that all transparently for you. But it has a signature scheme, MPC scheme that will sign transactions for you on any chain you want. So if you want to get the security of Sui, where all your assets are governed by Sui, you get that. If you want to still maintain your assets in other chain, you get that as well. So that's the element of how you can take the power that Sui offers you to other chains and use that as a way to control assets wherever you want.
So I also want to talk a bit more about this object-based approach. So the object here, it can be a smart contract, or it can be an account, or like, what are the types of things that are objects?
So the smallest unit of computation in Sui is strongly typed objects in Sui. It's not bits or bytes. They're strongly typed objects. That's the smallest unit of computation, which means everything to a large extent is an object in Sui. Your NFTs are object, your coins are objects, your account is an object, everything is an object. In fact, we don't really have an account model in Sui, right? Everything's an object model in Sui. So, that paradigm, the world doesn't think from an account perspective, it thinks around objects. Like, this is an object. I own it in my hand, I hold it, I transfer it to people. That element of transferring an object from one person to another, it's inherently baked into the underlying design for Sui. That lets you do really powerful things. Because there's strongly typed objects now, right? I can take an object as an argument into a function, and it's a virtual machine to ensure the integrity of that object is maintained. So it means I can build a DEX, right? And the assets I support can be dynamic, or I can build, an NFT that would take two objects and it would merge them and spit out something else in the end. But ultimately, it means now people can build on the work that I have. Interfaces are not the way to do that. Interfaces, in a world where contract itself, we always say, is a sin. Like, interfaces are a sin, right? Object is really what you want, right? You have an object that's strongly typed, very well defined. You have, a function that really will take that object as a set of inputs. From a programmability point of view, makes a lot of sense, because that's how you build in any programming language today. You're taking an object as a bit of a function, you execute computation over it, and you spit something else out. That is what Sui offers you. This is why most developers get Sui very easily. You're not trying to think of, hey, I need to protobuf some bit stream and reconstruct something off the end of it, make sure that the integrity is maintained, have some kind of hash table to manage everything. And it's all a mess, right? This is why you have all these hacks, right? And really bad systems design. There's no real composability with majority of other systems. Whereas with an object-based system, what you do get is a fully permissionless composability, which matters, right? I don't need to give you permission to use some kind of interface to engage with me. There's no kind of standard you need to formally adapt. You simply just use an object, which is what you're used to in traditional programming languages, which is way, way better. And everything is a single address space. None of this sharding nonsense that people talk about where, hey, where's my shard? Where's my data? Is in shard 1, shard 2. It's a single space that you worry about from a developer point of view, which means everything is accessible from a single address space, which is where you get a composability, and everything is atomic in that sense.
So I'm curious how that connects with, how you guys process transactions. So you have all of these different transactions coming in, and some of them kind of touch different objects. And because right, Sui, one of the ways you guys achieve this kind of scalability is through being able to process transactions in parallel. So do you guys then try to upfront see, okay, which, where do you have it? Because obviously one of the challenges, so let's say now you have one transaction that touches a bunch of others, and then so I think in Solana, right, you have to say upfront what accounts or contracts you touch, and then they kind of parallelize it. So is it a little bit similar to that,
No,
or like?
so there's no need to do that. kind of nonsense in Sui, right? Because everything is an object in a space, you're defining the object you're using at any given time. For example, I'm submitting my object X into the function of object Y, right? And that's very well defined in normal programming paradigm. It's very easy to think about that from a normal programming perspective. You're not thinking of addresses. You're not thinking of how do I deal with contention from that point of view. You're simply just writing applications. But the key thing is you're almost incentivized to write code that takes advantage of Sui's parallelization. In a scenario, let's say, for example, right, like because there are two objects and they're touching different bits of state, they are processed automatically in parallel in Sui. No questions asked. You don't have to worry about that. But what about if you have something that's a hot object where there's real contention? Because when something's contentious, it's contention. There's no magic art, right? There's nothing you can do around contention. You've got to be able to still process things in a sequence, but deal with that contention. So Sui does have localized fee markets that will increase price on hot objects only, but affects nothing else with other transactions. So if you have an object that's hot, that's high contention, no other transactions in the Sui ecosystem is affected. You won't even notice because it's nothing to do with you, right? But what you'd notice is the gas fees for that particular contentious object starts to increase. So what you as a developer can do, let's say, for example, I have a pool that's JPY USD, and I'm finding this contention on JPY USD. But what I can do is I can create multitude of pools for different price points, right? To start to spread that contention a bit more broadly across a number of objects. So what you can start to do is break down objects into smaller components to spread that contention over a number of objects, and you get that parallelization as a result of that. So that's more of a natural way to solving the problem than this brute force of tell me what you're going to touch and I'm going to decide if I'm going to be able to parallelize it or not. That is way more natural for a program design paradigm than what is afforded to people using other schemes today.
So that basically means, let's say now there's a DEX and a lot of people trying to trade with this DEX. So the fees then for interacting with the DEX, they're going to go up, whereas normal transactions...
For that particular pair, not the entire DEX.
Pair, yeah.
So if that particular pair is hot and the other pairs aren't hot, you'll not see any increase for anyone else, right? It would just be that particular pair.
And then the order, and then you basically say, okay, now we have a particular block and there's like 10 transactions that all interact with this particular pair. Then they would get executed in order of, basically highest fee to lowest fee.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah. I think kind of touches on something I want to come back to later, which is the MEV topic. But let's talk a bit more about the developer experience. So I know Move is obviously, you guys are the leading Move chain, and Move is, today, I guess we have the three leading ways, right? If you have smart contracts is Solidity, EVM, right? Still number one, and then SVM, Solana, and then Move, right? So if you think of those three, what are the main differences from a developer perspective building on Sui and on Move?
So Sui is not account based, whereas Solana and EVM is. Sui is strongly typed in terms of dealing with strongly typed objects, where everything else doesn't really solve that problem for you. The programming paradigm allows you for parallel execution natively, which it doesn't give you for Solana, nor does it give you for EVM. Well, Solana is actually better than EVM from programming perspective, right? But still, it doesn't give you the same kind of safeties that Move, that's fundamentally purpose-built for assets, give you. The developer journey is a lot easier. I mean, people make a lot of noise about chewing glass as though that's a good thing, right? It's actually a bad thing. People are learning Move very, very quickly. We're saying up to 4 days, people are picking it up and become quite adept to writing actually interesting applications very, very quickly. From a DevEx perspective, the fact that you've got primitives baked into the layer one, for example, randomness is baked into the layer one. You don't need an oracle for it. Zero knowledge proof are baked into the layer one, so you don't need like any off-chain mechanism for that. The ability to verify people's identity directly is on chain with ZKLogin, done in a very private way, can be done directly on chain. No need for off-chain oracles or off-chain third-party middleware. So we come from the perspective of you provide as much functionality in the base layer so developers can compose and build things that are interesting, rather than counting on third-party integrations to make that work. So I think From that perspective, you can build more interesting, more engaging businesses on Sui than you can on Solana or ETH. Now, Sui, of course, is the youngest of all these chains. It's only been around for 2 years, so there's some catching up to do. But I think Sui is doing relatively well. If you had to benchmark where Solana started its journey and where it was in 2 years, where Sui is, and in 2 years, there's an ocean divide from how we've performed versus other chains in our time frame.
Let's talk about the consensus. So how does that work, and how are you guys able to achieve such low latency and such high throughput?
Well, I'm not a world expert in consensus myself, though my co-founders are, and so is the engineering team. But I can talk about it from a high-level perspective. So we've been able to build what is called a DAG-based consensus scheme. In fact, it's probably the first DAG-based consensus scheme that people fully understand and can teach as at college. So some colleges, some Ivy League colleges, are actually teaching it as part of their distributed systems courses now, because you can actually make sense of it. It's fully understandable. So this DAG-based consensus scheme reduces the amount of verification. Is a non-verified DAG, which means you do not need to verify the steps in each transitioning of a DAG. Over time, you get that verification by proxy of getting enough signatures, rather than having to do the verification up front. What that means as well is it reduces the amount of round trips you need to do before you get certainty on the transaction. So that reduction in the amount of round trips you need to do to get certainty on the transaction reduces latency. So Sui is by far the lowest latency chain when it comes to actual finality. I'm not talking about block times, because block times are numbers people like to make up all the time. It bears no resemblance to what finality really is. And I'm not talking about optimistic transact finality, because if you want to go there, Sui is like 20 seconds optimistic finality, 20 milliseconds optimistic finality. But who cares? That doesn't matter. What you care about is, from when I click a button, when is it final? When is it irreversible from a finality standpoint? And from that perspective, Sui, again, is the lowest latency chain from that perspective as well. So that gives us a big advantage over other chains. Separately, the DAG-based consensus, we take advantage of it for ensuring transactions are done as quickly as possible. It gives us the robustness that we have, the 12 plus 1 number of validators before you have any kind of faults. So it gives us a kind of speed that has never been seen before. I mean, we already had a very fast consensus scheme with Narwhal and Bullshark when we went to mainnet, and the goal was always to get faster and faster. We'd see what the team comes up with next. It's hard to imagine something faster, but there's actually a Mysten version 2 coming out soon that would reduce latency even lower to what we have today.
Do you feel, I mean, so you mentioned 297K transactions a second. That's kind of like token sense, or does it include like smart contract transactions?
So those are just peer-to-peer transactions. So if you
Yeah.
want to do like those are like payments, if you're doing payments. So if you want to do smart contract transactions, it depends on what smart contract you're executing. But again, Sui is parallelizable. So you can do many things in parallel. Another thing that to bring up is Sui has this unique feature called PTBs, which is programmable transaction blocks. So I can atomically conjure up 1024 transactions together. And what I mean by that is individual transactions. Let's say, for example, I want to do a trading strategy where I take a flash loan, take that proceed, put it into a lending pool, take instantly a borrow out of our lending pool, put it into a DeFi trade, take advantage of an ARB, settle that back with my lending pool and back again. In the normal chain, these are independent transactions you have to do one by one. Or you need to craft a smart contract for that specific path. As we know, everything's dynamic. The path's not always fixed. And you want to be able to make decisions with off-chain data at times as well. With Sui, you can craft up to 1024 heterogeneous transactions together and execute them atomically, instantly within 300 milliseconds. So that's another game changer. So if you are a market maker and you're trading on Deepbook, which is a central limit order book, you're holding 500 positions across Deepbook and you need to rebalance those positions or move them to a different pricing point, you can execute that movement of removing the positions and then requoting them in a different price point with a single transaction. You cannot do that anywhere else in the world, right? You can't even do that on centralized stacks in an atomic way. Whereas Sui, you given that atomicity where you can submit all your cancels and all your new bids instantly with a single transaction batch. And that's something you can't do on Sol, ETH, or any other change. You can't even do that on a NASDAQ, quite frankly. So that's a superpower that Sui has that I think starts to bear the question as to, we believe that majority of trades in the future will happen on chain as long as the stacks can take care of the bandwidth.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from the kind of scalability you guys already have, do you think is that mostly solved, or do you expect that? I mean, I guess it depends a lot, right, how things play out. But do you expect that has to scale still a lot more
Yeah,
for
so
sort of eventually?
the next step for us will be launching what we're calling Remora, which is our scaling infrastructure. Again, that lets you go horizontal. You add more hardware, you scale horizontally. We're not at capacity yet, so there's no real need to release that right away. But Sui has a solution for horizontal scalability. The only thing we're going to keep doing is just optimizing the single compute unit for the computer, right? You make that more and more optimized over time. We already got the scalability from a horizontal perspective. Other chains do not have that. Other chains will talk about sharding, then you lose atomicity, and there's no composability across shards. And people have a tough time writing two-phase commit algorithms, right? How are they going to even solve that atomicity issue when it comes to shards? I think they're really they're promising something that they can't deliver on. So from our perspective, we already have the scalability solution. What we want to keep doing is working on how do we get the most performance out of that virtual machine as possible. There are lots of things we can do around the Move VM to make it even more efficient than it is today, but that's not the bottleneck at this point in time. So right now, it's really just keep on shipping more functionality to make it the best place for devs to build.
Let's talk a little bit about MEV. I think there's like very different opinions on, what is MEV? Is it something change should try to prevent, or, and, we've also had different architectures, right? Where many chains, the validators build the blocks. Ethereum, of course, most importantly, has separated that out, right? With having proposers and builders and having those roles separated. Like, how do you think about MEV, and like, how does MEV work today in Sui?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that somebody can put a transaction ahead of me, knowing full well I'm giving them information to trade on my behalf, and they're using that information to rob me blind. I don't know how people justify that as a good thing. I'm sorry. I don't care what chain you are or what kind of school of economics you come from. That's just wrong, right? You can always say that's somewhat illegal to a large extent, right? Using some information I'm giving you to front run me and then screw me on price and say, okay, well, it's MEV, so it must be okay. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. Sui, now, MEV is not impossible in any infrastructure, but with Sui, it's almost impossible to make money doing MEV on Sui, especially in a deterministic way, right? We do have some schemes on Sui and projects on Sui that are making MEV more client friendly. Namely, if there's an opportunity to do any form of MEV, the rewards go directly to those who are participating in the ecosystem, namely token holders, the trader directly. These are happening. So there are like fast paths to execute trades really quickly that are happening right now on Sui. But MEV is an area that we're very passionate about, but to the point where we would rather shift the direction in the hands of those who are doing the trades themselves, not in some kind of miner that's going to extract value from consumer experience. Like, think about it, right? I put in $50 and I expected to get $50 in Bitcoin, but I get $48. That's not right. I don't know how you can ever argue that that's a right thing to do in any world, right? In a world where I put in $50 and I get 50 back, that's what we want to be in. But also maybe if I get 51 because I'm able to take advantage of some other opportunity elsewhere in some pool due to some arbitrage, that's actually a positive from a consumer perspective. And I'd always be in the side of a consumer rather than the miners.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is interesting how, in the beginning, right, when the whole MEV concept came up, people were like, oh, this is really bad. And then I think in Ethereum, right, it switched so quickly to like, okay, that's just the norm, and everyone gets extracted to the maximum possible.
The problem is Swe's so fast that it's very hard to do, right? So when you
Yeah.
have a chain that's very slow, like ETH, or even Sol, where you know there's a lot of opportunity for MEV on Sol, right, because of the architecture. Um, you don't have the opportunities on Sui, so it's very, very hard problem to solve for Sui. Namely, if you do make it possible, you want to make sure it's tipped in the favor and balance of those who are actually doing the trades, not some arbitrary member. So we actually think it's a problem that you want to index on solving in some way. At least if you're going to solve it, you solve it in the direction of consumers rather than fee huggers to a large degree.
So, but the way today this might work is that, a validator, they get their transactions and then they still maybe plug into some sort of API, with some kind of, MEV company builder, and then they do some sort of transaction insertion or reorganization, which obviously would be much harder if you have less time, for sure. But is that the kind of the main way something like this gets prevented?
So there are a number of ways. I'm not a MEV expert, so it was probably worthwhile getting Sam or the call to talk more about the intrinsic way that we've built these protections. They're actually two different providers that are vying to solve this problem. One with a validator integration. One is simply just an on-chain integration that doesn't require any validator upgrades. So there are two directions that people are taking towards this, but both are taking the approach of value must be given to token holders or those who are trading, rather than those who are trying to extract value. But intricacies of how it really works is beyond my level of expertise or domain expertise, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the areas that you guys are focusing on. So, I mean, one is gaming, right? Gaming has been, let's say, kind of a topic like crypto gaming, right? Has been something that's been for many years as something people felt like, there's a lot of potential there. I think the main reason for it I often heard was like, well, maybe games have assets and then people don't really own those assets in the games, and maybe it would be nice if people actually owned them and maybe they could use them somewhere else. So like, but what do you feel like is the case for uh having gaming on chain?
Yeah, so I'm not a believer that says games have to be on chain. I think I'm a believer that games just need to be more fun. And the games that always historically do well are the ones that can keep the user base engaged for as long as possible and can keep increasing the user base for a franchise. So Sui or technologies that get involved in gaming needs to solve that problem. So the partners we're working with are massive, are large in scale, and we've been able to convince them that their business model is way more sustainable using Sui as a chain. Some of these games don't have to be on chain. Maybe Sui is used for the App Store concept of selling in-game assets, or it's used for registering entitlements or rewards, or it's used for token gating access to specific content, or used as a mechanism to build an incentive scheme that lasts the test of time. So our work with game studios are along those lines. We actually launched a games console called SuiPlay ZX1, which we announced last year, and it's actually going to be shipping this summer. It's sold out as a result of the work the team's done. Really good work by the team. But beyond that is there's a game operating system called the Playtron OS that's going to power the future of games. So this operating system you can do boot with your Windows machine. It runs on the Steam Deck. It runs on SuiPlay ZX1. Anyway, you want to play Steam, Epic, or Web3 games, you don't have to make a decision between platforms anymore. It'll run all those games for you. And then with that comes with a deep integration with ZKLogin. So just by logging into your normal account, you now have a wallet in the back end. We don't even call it a wallet. And you start to earn rewards for playing any Web2 or Web3 games. In addition to being able to be given rewards for, or at least discounts to be able to buy games because they find, hey, there's a correlation between people who play War of Warcraft versus some other game. If we give them a discount, maybe they're more likely to play our game, right? So the ability to engage and acquire users much more frictionlessly is going to be what Web3 powers. And these are the kind of investments we make. We're more betting on big items, long-term things that can make an impact from a business perspective, not the hype stuff, right? I think mass majority of games that have been around in crypto, I always say, are spreadsheets or things that are built by accountants that pretend to be games rather than hardcore games that people find fun. And our partners we work with have built games that have grossed billions of dollars a year in revenue, and they know how to build fun and engaging games. The Web3 element is an aid to make the game experience way more compelling than a way to extract value by overcharging on NFTs or putting some element of token gated in there that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's our thesis on that.
And what was I'm curious about the SuiPlay, the console you guys are coming out with. What's the thing behind it, and how does it work?
So the SuiPlay ZX1 is a highly powered handheld gaming device that has got great battery life, great screen, great graphics card, and lets you play your PC games wherever you are, portable. It'll play your games on your Steam Deck. It'll play your Epic games. It would also play Web3 games because it has its own app store. typically you're having to choose between one device or another. Now with the SuiPlay device, one device does all that for you in a single unit. Chief of that is the fact that there's a Web3 integration, right? So whether you're playing a Web2 game, Web3 game, it doesn't matter. We don't even call it out. Where's a Web2, Web3 game? They're just games. And now you have a single device from a utility perspective that will reward you based on whatever games you play. Doesn't really throw Web3 in your face. You get to own your asset by your account that you create on the system. And you don't need to worry about wallets. The payments will be by stable coins. And you don't have to be overcharged the credit card fees that people bill you on. The element, the thought process is, in fact, if you launch your game on a SuiPlay ZX1 from an App Store perspective, you won't have to pay those fees, those high fees that App Stores charge you. And that means that money you save as a game studio can go back into building a better game or rewarding the users with better incentives to keep playing.
Right. Okay. So basically, from a user perspective, I can kind of buy this thing, and it's a good gaming console anyway, and I can play my existing games. But then there can also be more like blockchain games that have maybe their own tokenomics and incentives and stuff. And then from a developer perspective, it just makes it easy to develop those games and then get distribution through everyone who has the console.
Correct. I remember this operating system will get installed on PCs, set-top boxes, you name it. So everywhere they go, their account is with them. So it's a distribution play. We want to be everywhere. And we think by 2030, most gamers will have a wallet in some form. We think that wallet will be a ZKLogin wallet with Sui.
Cool. How many of the devices have been ordered?
We only made 10,000 to get it started, and that's already sold out. We have other manufacturers that want to build a SuiPlay device for their own user base and things like that, which is exciting.
Cool. Very cool. So you mentioned the other two big categories is like finance and commerce. I mean, DeFi, of course, is the thing that, I would say the thing that crypto has actually nailed the best so far. How does the Sui DeFi ecosystem, how does it compare with others?
Yeah, I mean, Sui is the sixth largest chain, probably top 5 chain when it comes to DeFi volumes, and in the top 10 firmly in terms of TVL. So Sui is already showing product market fit in areas of DeFi. Transaction volumes, in fact, one of the top 4 dexes in all of Web3 is a Sui dex already. So that's already exciting from a growth perspective. One of the areas of focus for us right now is actually BTC5. We want to be the chain that brings utility for a ton of Bitcoiners. That's exemplified by a partnership with Isha, who's going to be launching this scheme that lets you control your Bitcoin assets on Sui without ever having to use bridges. And more than 10% of the TVL on Sui is growing very quickly to Bitcoin. That's only going to grow over time as well. So our focus is really to grow the financial ecosystem. We have stablecoins. We have something like 4 stablecoins on Sui. We're going to be adding another that will be announcing at Basecamp. Separately from that as well, there is more opportunities to onboard other currencies into Sui that we're looking at. We think FX trades will be a massive volume driver for DeFi and Sui, especially if you're thinking about, JPY, you're thinking about, euro dollar baskets as well. There's an opportunity for us there, and I think Sui is going to do really, really well when it comes to FX trades. The carry trade is going to be real.
And then when you think of commerce, do you think, I guess payments is one aspect, right? So maybe stablecoin payments. Are there
Correct.
other things that
When
you
I think
see
about
there?
commerce, it's the whole thing. It's like the ability to pay, send and receive payments, the ability to make bulk transactions on behalf of your user base, and the ability to reward your user base and keep them engaged with reward systems, incentive systems, the ability to acquire users, target users, reward users. All those things are an element of commerce. I think blockchains, fortunately, will do way better than traditional ads. I think the ad business of just like paying and spraying, especially with the session cookie being gone, is going to falter. I think blockchains and wallets and the idea of like entitlement systems are going to be what you build ad businesses or ad networks off the back of moving forward. It's the element of shifting the balance into the favor of the consumer and taking away from centralized systems. Actually, it's better from a business perspective, right? The ad spend you'd make might be higher, but the cumulative rewards you get out of that ad spend will be better because it's a better targeted audience than this spray approach that you do today.
And recently you guys launched Walrus, which has gotten also like lots of attention, and is a very interesting. Like, what's the vision for Walrus?
Yeah, I made the point yesterday that in 2 years, Mysten Labs has launched 3 unicorns. Walrus being one of them, Deepbook being one of them, and of course Sui. Walrus is a global storage layer. I mean, one of the feedback we heard from a lot of developers is, by the way, Sui is about 100 times cheaper to store data than Sol, and about 2,000 times cheaper to store data than ETH, but still it's too expensive, right? Because you've got this replication factor. You're storing data on each validator, and then you're multiplying that. So if you store on Amazon, maybe you're paying 3 to 4x replication. If you store on Sui, you're paying 100x replication, which makes no sense, right? So you might be able to store a megabyte, 2 megabytes, fine. You have it there forever, no problem. But if you want to start storing gigabytes, it's got petabytes of data, you only really have Arweave that makes you pay 100 years in advance for data, which makes no sense. Or you have Filecoin that doesn't really give you the guarantees you want, and it's very, very slow in terms of downloads. There's no real solution for fully decentralizing your front end and back end. So we built Walrus specifically to solve that problem that we're hearing from developers. Now you have a fully programmable storage layer that lets you store petabytes and gigabytes of data for dirt cheap. It's comparable to Amazon in terms of pricing, way more distributed, way more decentralized, way more resilient to faults. And your files are broken up using a Redshift algorithm that effectively splits them into billions of fragments across hundreds, if not thousands of services. You only need to contact, a third to two-thirds of those machines to get your data at any given time. So it's actually a third of those machines to get your data. So even if two-thirds of the network is down, you can still access your files. You don't get that kind of resilience with any service provider that exists today. So this is us taking what people expect from centralized services and making it possible on decentralized services. And Walrus by far is the most scalable, fastest, and most programmable way of storing data. And what's coming for Walrus next is Seal, which is a scheme that lets you encrypt and decrypt files fully decentralized. So I can use my Google account to encrypt my files, and it's all done fully in a decentralized way. I can give you access to the file to see it. I can get access to content that's saying, if you pay me $50 or one Bitcoin, you can gain access to data. Now that programmability aspect becomes very, very critical. You can do all that programmability and gate content for the first time using fully decentralized schemes.
Yeah, that's super cool. So it basically, I mean, one thing is, okay, it competes, or it can be a better alternative to things like Filecoin, things like Arweave, right? That, have gotten some traction, but pretty limited, right? Because I think they're also still pretty limited in terms of, cost is still high, right? And performance. So there's that. And then the thing of having your entire application on chain, right? So I mean, you mentioned the example of the Gnosis Safe and the Bybit hack, right? Where basically the issue, right? One of the huge issue. I mean, there was a famous article, by Moxie Mullenspike, the Signal creator, right? Where he was like, "Hey, this blockchain thing is kind of bullshit because you have the smart contract things that's like on chain and verifiable, and then people interact with it through these web applications where they have no control over."
He is spot on. He was spot on. That's exactly it, right? You build this amazing, you're waving the arms, oh, it's all smart contracts and whatever, and then how do you access it? Some third-party website API that has been hacked. That was hacked, and people knew it was hacked for quite a while, actually. And, this has happened all over in Web3. Whereas now with Walrus, you can get a guarantee that the package or the website you're engaging with is what the developer intended for it to be. And you cannot have the subversion of someone injecting something where it's not possible anymore. So I think that element of security that Walrus brings is going to take Walrus beyond Web3. Think about cybersecurity, think about government, right? Think about banking, think about all the use cases where knowing what you're dealing with, knowing what you're engaging with is very, very critical. And you want to protect the user funds or user data, user information. Walrus is the only thing that lets you do that in a fully permissionless way and fully programmatic way. So that's a scheme that I think is going to be critical for the future. This is why I'm very bullish on the future of Walrus, because it solves the boundary transparency issue. At the same time, it's a programmable storage layer where you can build arbitrary rules as to what accesses content or what can update content. And that rule can be fully transparent to the world. That's a level of security that you do not get when you try to build something on AWS or GCP. It's just not possible.
And then you also mentioned Nautilus. Can you walk us through that as well?
Yeah, so one of the next things we heard as developer feedback was, hey, we've got storage, we've got compute, We've got compute via smart contracts, right? We've got the ability to run a whole front end, but there are things that we want to do off chain that we can't get certain guarantees on chain about. For example, if I want to do oracles, right, for data that don't exist today. For example, I want to know what burgers cost in Missouri, right? Like, maybe, who knows, like, what use case it is, right? I have no way to verify that scheme or verify that data. Well, with probably the worst example, burgers in Missouri, there are multiple. but, but if you want to verify some computation that's happened on chain and happened off chain, but use a smart contract to verify that that computation happened correctly, you're very stuck with options that exist today, right? You don't need to pay a lot of money to an Oracle service to provide that data at great cost. There's no way for you to do something yourself to make that verification possible. So what Nautilus gives you is the ability to use trusted execution environments, or TEEs, to do that computation. Right now, Amazon Nitro, there'll be other enclaves over time. It could do that computation, and you can submit that attestation that the enclave will give you directly to a smart contract on Sui, and it can give you that it can verify that that computation happened correctly and proceed and store the data directly on Sui. So if I want to get a pricing feed for, beef in some country in the world and do that in real time, I want to know what the weather is in some part of the world and store that on chain. I want to prove that I've done some kind of move in a game and then verify that on chain. I want to, ensure that the horse race that happened at the top derby in the world had the right winner, and I want to reward the right person that submits the set of bets that matter. I can do that directly off chain and verify that with Sui. What it really does is expand the surface area of what you can do with off chain data, and you can bring veracity to off chain data and do that in a fully trustless way with Sui. That's what's key. It's the ability to compute things off chain, bring the attestation that was computed off chain, and get that verified by a smart contract in order to do amazing programmatic use cases.
Right. So you could, like, as an example, right? So let's say if I'm a lending protocol and I wanted to use some data, right? Some kind of credit scoring thing, right? And that could be like,
Correct.
oh, I'm gonna have this program, and it's on chain, right? So you can see what the program is, but then it's executed in Nautilus, maybe logs into my bank, checks some things, and
Yeah,
then basically can report some score back on chain, and it also maintains the privacy in this case, right?
correct. You have a better analogy or a better example than I do. You should take my job. Want my burgers and beef. Maybe I'm hungry or something. More
Yeah.
Jim.
So I'm curious, so because your title is like chief product officer, so you work kind of, because this is like you work on those particular products as well as kind of the overall chain, or do you focus on it kind of also from a Sui as a product for the end user, Sui as a product for developers, or seems like a vast scope.
All the
Yeah.
above, right? Everything from what we do on the consumer front to what we do on the developer front to the platforms we're launching. Fortunately, we have a great team, right? We have a great team that leads all these efforts, and I'm here as a help and an aid to ensure that we unlock decision making as quickly as possible. So we've been very blessed with to build what I believe is one of the strongest teams in this space. That's why we keep executing and always delivering all the time. It's strength of the team. I can't do it all myself. The team is really over delivered in the last 2 years.
Right. And then, so do you guys spin out some of these things, so Walrus, and they kind of then pursued independently, or like you kind of incubate them and spin them out, or?
Yeah, so Sui Foundation is an independent entity from Mysten. So is the Walrus Foundation. As we know, Walrus Foundation recently raised about $140 million. That's independent of Sui. So it operates itself, has its own mandate, has its own agenda. We are here as a technology partner to help support and provide updates and upgrades to the network. And over time, the goal is that other contributors, which is already happening with Sui, are participating in the improvement of the protocol over time as well. So it's not Walrus is not run by Mysten, neither is Sui run by Mysten. We're the original creators of it, but we're also core contributors to it. And the plan always is like you expand the contributor base to Sui and Walrus and everything else that we launch.
So when you think of the roadmap for Sui, what are we mentioned, we talked about some of the things, right, that you guys are working on, but what do you see as the most important, like milestones and things that have to be done in the next like 2 years?
Developer growth, an unhealthy infatuation with growing the developer base. That's what we're doing now. We've got the platform now, we've got the dev tools, we have the storage, we have the coordination, we have the encryption, we have the off-chain verification, we have the trading, we have it all. Now it's adoption. And you're going to see us in an unhealthy way, overly indexing on aggressively growing the developer base as fast as possible. That's going to be what our passion is going to be for the next 2 years. So that's going to be the passion. I think, look, we're building what we believe is the new stack for the internet. Now it's time to go out to sell it to the world.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Adeniyi. It was super great. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how this plays out. I'm curious for people who want to, you know, they, I think there's probably a lot of our listeners, they know about Sui, they've heard of Sui, but maybe they haven't played around with it yet. They haven't experienced some of the things yet. What do you think are some of the best things that people can, do to get started and to try it out as a user?
Yeah, if you're a Phantom wallet user, Phantom's coming out soon, so you can even use it in beta mode now. Download the Phantom wallet and get Sui on, buy some Sui, and start playing around with lending protocols. Or go to Sui.io and look at the list of wallets. We have the Sui wallet, we have the Surf wallet, the number of wallets you can download today. It's always the best onboarding to start with the wallets. Even better still, if you don't want to download wallets, go to GetStashed, GetStashed.com, and then you can effectively sign in with a Google account, and you instantly have a wallet on Sui. You create a username, and you can start engaging with the chain instantly. So we have it all for people to start playing with. Whether your interest is DeFi, your interest is casinos, you're interested in NFTs, Sui has all that and above for you. And there's a lot more coming to the ecosystem. We announced our partnership with MoviePass, the ability to soon be able to buy concert tickets with stable coins and start engaging with the movie industry in a lot more interesting ways. We partnered with Eli Gold, who is one of the most prominent guys when it comes to the horror movie industry. That whole space of the movie industry is very interesting, and we think that's going to be greatly changed with crypto. Gaming, of course.
The horror movie industry.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because now, if you imagine, the problem with movie industry is like nobody owns a whole stack. From the time when you wouldn't believe, right? Like there's some movies that actors are still waiting to be paid for, right? You've done a movie 2 years ago, you still haven't been paid, or 4 years ago, you still haven't been paid. No one could do the audit as to how much it grossed, right? How many tickets were sold, and how do you disperse payment in a way that's transparent. So now you're going to have a full end-to-end system where the movie lovers can fund the movies, get to watch the movies for free, in addition to sharing the upside of the outcomes of the movies. So it means that everybody's guaranteed to be paid, whether you're the actor in a movie all the way to the person who was holding the camera. Your payments will be guaranteed, but also you build a closer relationship between those who love the movies and those who actually create the movies, which is, I always say, commerce is a key thing. It's a problem across the world, whether you want a publisher of a game to build a closer relationship to the players of the game, whether you want the watchers of movies to be closer to those who actually create the movies. That element of like building that bridge where there are too many intermediaries that exist today is going to be broken. That's what the decentralized stack solves for you.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Adeniyi. It was really, really great. And yeah, super exciting to talk with you.
Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.